Hi booktubers! Today I'm here to do a series review on the Wolves of Mercy Falls series by Maggie Stiefvater, and it's a trilogy, and the books are Shiver, Linger, and Forever. Now, anybody who has watched my videos, especially lately, knows that I am a huge fan of this series, and I finished Forever last night. It was extremely bittersweet for me because I love the series so much and I'm really sad that it's ending. But all in all, I have to say I am satisfied with the way Maggie Stiefvater ended the series. I do have a couple of little nitpicky problems I had with the final book, which I'll get to in just a minute. But before I get started on my actual review, I will say that since this is a series review, I'm just going to assume that because you're watching it, you've read at least the first book. I will try and keep the spoilers to a minimum, but in order to talk about the series, I do have to talk about certain aspects of the story. So if you haven't read the series, you might want to turn this off and move on to a different video. So there's your warning. Okay, so very, very briefly, in the first book, Shiver, we meet this girl named Grace who was attacked by wolves when she was little, and during the attack, the one wolf that sort of was not attacking her and in fact ended up saving her life had yellow eyes, and from that moment on she sort of considered him to be her wolf. And several years later she finds this boy collapsed at her back door, and he has yellow eyes, and it turns out that he's her wolf shifted into human form. And this is sort of, it's very much a love story between Sam and Grace, and Sam struggling with his desperate need to stay human so he can remain with Grace. And the second book in the series, Linger, it's still primarily about the love story between Sam and Grace. However, this time it's more around Grace's struggle, and because she finds herself closer and closer to shifting, and she had never shifted even after the attack when she was a little girl, and that was always like a big question as to, she was attacked but she never shifted. And now in this book she gets closer and closer to feeling like that's exactly what's getting ready to happen to her. And in Forever, this is more of an angsty book, I guess. It sort of tries to tie up loose ends throughout all of the storylines going on, and tries to give some kind of closure as Cole attempts to find a cure for Grace and Sam. Now, okay, so I did a review video of Shiver, so I'm briefly just going to give you my thoughts on the other two books in the series. Linger was beautifully written, just as Shiver was, although in my opinion, I will say right now that Shiver is far and away my favorite book in the series. I love the fact that it was primarily just a love story and it wasn't really about werewolves, whereas this book was sort of more about Sam and Grace learning to be a couple, learning to deal with everything that was going on in their lives. And I found the scenes with Grace getting sicker and sicker and sicker really hard to read. Not that it ever made me want to stop reading the book, because obviously I loved the book, but it was heartbreaking to read those scenes. And at the very end, just absolutely ripped my heart out. It was, ugh. Now, as for Forever, like I said, reading this book was very bittersweet for me because I had grown so attached to these characters in a very short period of time. And I understand why a lot of people were disappointed by this book, disappointed by the actual ending. I'm okay with the ending because if you read all of her books, she never really resolves issues at the end of her books. In my opinion, I think Shiver would have made an excellent standalone novel because I think the ending was absolute perfection to that book. So I can kind of understand on both sides of it. I understand that a lot of people were frustrated and upset with the actual ending of this book because it was very open-ended, but I liked the way that she kind of wanted the reader to make up their own minds as to what happened to Sam and Grace. I did, however, have a problem with something that happened with Sam towards the very end of the book. He ended up, and this is like a major spoiler alert, I'm just going to say this right now. So if you haven't read Forever and you don't want to hear what I'm about to say, turn this video off and move to something else. But the aspect that bothered me the most was the fact that Cole convinced Sam that he had to shift back into a wolf to help the wolves, help the pack move to this other location. In one way, I can kind of understand why he had to do it, but it kind of bothered me because it was just in the first book, he was just so desperate to stay human, and one of the things that I loved so much about that first book was that he seemed like he was finally going to have the life that he wanted. He wanted to stay, he was going to be able to stay human, even though it broke his heart knowing that Grace was now shifting into a wolf. This is just like nitpicking on my part. I don't know anybody else who got upset by this, but it bothered me that he had to go through the whole shifting thing again, because it just did, even though in the context of the story it made sense. So, and I also didn't like the fact that they kind of tried to make Beck into a villain. And even though that was sort of resolved towards the end of the book, it bothered me, that aspect. But all in all, I was satisfied with the book. Could it have been better? Yes, it could have been better, but it also could have had 3 more books in the series, and I would have been happy with that. So I don't think anybody will ever be perfectly happy with the way any series ends. But all in all, it was a good ending to the series. So, because you guys know how obsessed I am with the series, it's obvious that this is hugely, highly recommended by me. I've heard from people. There are quite a few people who were never able to get into the series, which is understandable because it is kind of different, and I know a lot of people don't like the changing POVs that go on in the series. But if you like love stories, if you like paranormal romances too, I mean, this is more of a love story. The first book especially is more of a love story rather than a para-romance. But yeah, if you're leery of reading anything about werewolves or whatever, if you're like me who never really liked werewolf stories before, this is a different take on the werewolf story, trust me. So yes, the Wolves of Mercy Falls series by Maggie Stiefvater, probably right up there in my top 3 series of all time. So definitely try and check them out. And as always, show me some love. If there's a series or anything you'd like to see me do a review on, let me know. I'm always happy and looking for suggestions. So until then, guys, thanks so much for watching as always, and happy reading.